Well, welcome to God's Prophetic Surprises. We're in the middle of the book of Revelation, and we're just making a transition from chapter 7 to chapter 8. If you haven't been with us before, this is what we do, verse by verse through the book of Revelation, and just asking ourselves, where is this going, and what does it mean to us today? Dr. Jon Paulien from Loma, Pastor Shifra, who's right here at the Campus Hill Church as the pastor, and I'm down in Garden Grove, Dan Smith. Anyway, get a Bible, get your phone, and here we go. I think, John, what I'd like to do is that we'll read the first 5 verses of chapter 8, and then he would like to wrestle a little bit with what is the connection between seals and trumpets and this passage. We have sort of been doing the 6, 7 seals, then we had the interlude in chapter 7. 8 to 11 is all the 7 trumpets, and here we are, these 5 verses in the middle. And he said there is a dissertation of 800 pages wrestling with this. And John will summarize it in a minute or 2. Anyway.
I had to read every word of it about 5 times, too.
Anyway, get a Bible, and here we go. Revelation chapter 8. When he opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. We looked at that last week. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. And another angel who had a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. The smoke of the incense, together with the prayers of the saints, went up before God from the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it on the earth. And there came peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake.
Verse 6.
And the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared to sound them.
Okay.
All right, help us sort it out.
The big issue here is, what's the relationship of the 7 trumpets with the 7 seals? And a very popular view is that the 7th seal includes this opening scene with the altar of incense, etc. All right, so that's sort of the end of the seals. But it's also clearly the introduction to the 7 trumpets. So how's that going to work? Well, the popular view is that if the 7 seals kind of take us up to the second coming of Jesus, and then the trumpets are the 7th seal. You follow me?
Yes.
In other words, the 7th seal is everything that follows it. Very popular view. Then the trumpets would be the final events of Earth's history. I mean, right the very end, after the 6th seal, where you've got the islands and mountains moving out of their place, and the wrath of God is approaching, and the wicked are calling for the rocks and mountains to fall on them. The 7 trumpets is about that last few days, weeks, moments of history.
If they're one and the same.
Yeah. Well, if the trumpets are the 7th seal. Mm-hmm. So if you just say, all right, here, you open the 7th seal, and now the 7 trumpets, that's all the content of the book.
Futurists.
Yeah. And so some call that futurism.
Right.
Eckhard Muller, who did his doctoral dissertation with my direction about 20 years ago, he did an 800-page dissertation that centered very strongly in this very issue. And let me just share just a couple of reasons why he thinks the 7th seal ends in verse 1. For verse 2 begins with, and I saw. Now, if you go to the Greek text, it's kai edon. And in the book of Revelation, transitions begin with, and I saw. It's like a new vision.
Right.
All right? And you have, for example, an and I saw in chapter 6, verse 1. And I saw. So that's clearly a transition to a new vision. In chapter 5, verse 1, and I saw. So that's common language throughout Revelation for opening up something new. So Miller points out the and I saw isn't in verse 1, it's in verse 2. So you go to verse 1, when he broke the 7th seal, there was silence. And I saw the 7 angels. So in English, you could read verse 2 as following verse 1. Well, he did this, and then he saw. All right? But in the book consistently, it kind of opens something new. Miller points out one other thing. It's what he calls an envelope structure. If you read verse 2, it says, "And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given them." And then verse 6, "And the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound them." So you have a bracket here. Verse 2 and verse 6 are an envelope in which 3 and 5 are placed, which kind of separates 3 through 5 from the 7th seal. All right. I think there are 2 or 3 other observations in the Greek text that he was making, but I found it fairly convincing that this is primarily the introduction to the 7 trumpets rather than the conclusion of the 7 seals.
I'm going to email him and tell him that you summarize his 800-page document in half a page.
Well, he probably could have done it too, but he was too German for that.
Anyway.
And I'm not quite German enough.
You
maybe.
gave the abstract. Well done. Okay.
No, I admire his detailed scholarship very, very much. And, you know, you have 2 types of scholars. There are the types that love the details. And they're really good at them, and they make sure that they're accurate. And then there's types like me who love the big picture, and I'll build on some of these things, and I won't worry about the details too much. I just say, let's get the big picture straight. And I think you need both. And
so where are we going to go with it today? For someone sitting there with their Bible in their living room, where are we going to go with this?
Well, let me warn them right from the start. This is going to be heavy sledding, okay? Because when you're getting into the 7 trumpets, you are getting into probably one of the 3 or 4 most difficult texts in the entire Bible. Texts for whom you have 12 interpreters, you're going to get 13 opinions, you see? So obviously this is challenging, and it raises the question, Shifra, for anybody under 40, who cares? Is it worth it? Is any part of the Bible worth 30 years of intense study? And what would the answer to that be?
Depends what message you get out of it.
Now, do you mean all the 7 trumpets, or do you mean these 3 verses here?
Well, let's say the 7 trumpets, right? Because all of the 7 trumpets are as difficult as determining whether verses 1 and verse 2 should be connected or separated. I mean, these are...
Does it make a difference?
Yeah, does it matter?
If this is the opening or the closing? I think in the sense that, I mean, is this the end of the 7th seal, right? What happens within the 7th seal? Or is it, I mean, it would help us in timing. It might help us in, what else do you think it makes it so important?
Well, I guess the bottom line is, why does God put some things in the Bible that are almost impossible to understand?
I always think about it like Jacob, who wrestled with the angel, and he wrestled and he wrestled and he didn't give up wrestling until he was blessed.
Was it so complicated to the people who heard it? You say they knew what the silence in heaven was.
Okay.
With the people who heard it, they understand it. 2,000 years later, we don't have the context. I take a joke from here that everyone instantly laughs. I take it to the Philippines, and I just die. Because they don't have the cultural context and the memory to know the twist. When you turn right, all of a sudden, they can't get that connection. Are we in that situation where we just don't know it? Or were they confused and say, what in the world was that all about also?
When they received the letter
when they
from
got
Patmos.
it. Yeah.
Revelation.
So you're suggesting that maybe the 7 trumpets were written to be clearly understood at that time, and then they're no longer relevant?
I don't know. I look at the Hindu gods, for example, who look garish and unexplainable and terrible. Sometimes elephants and just long tusks and just come on. And then I have a Hindu priest explain them to me. They look at that picture, and that picture is as meaningful to them as when we say Jesus is our good shepherd. That's our metaphor. That's their metaphor, and they understand perfectly what they see in that picture. It works in their culture, and we have to have it explained to us, symbol by symbol by symbol. We're the people listening to this imagery. able to understand the imagery because they knew the Old Testament connections, because they'd been to the temple. These were phrases they used in their time, or was it pretty opaque to them also? Mm-hmm. Can we know that?
Mm-hmm. I would certainly suspect that most of the Bible, and certainly Revelation, tells us right at the beginning, chapter 1, verse 1. Actually, verse 3, it says, well, if I get out of Jude, that will help. But the revelation of Jesus Christ. Verse 3, blessed is he who reads.
Right.
Present tense. It's not a specific, he who reads and those who hear the words of this prophecy and keep the things written in it.
Yes.
So there's an idea. Whoever has an ear, let him hear. If it's preserved in the Scriptures, God has a purpose for it. Now, God gave a lot of messages to a lot of people that were just limited to their time and place. How do we know that? Nathan the prophet, major prophetic figure in the Bible, we don't have anything that he wrote. So God used him to make a difference in his time and place, but apparently his message did not have universal value. So if God chose to incorporate into Scripture the 7 trumpets, there must be a lasting purpose of some sort. And I think that there is, and we'll get to that before long.
Where are we going to go with that?
But getting there is not easy.
Are we going to wrestle with the time? Is it historical or is it future? Is that the thing we want to do now? Golden censer later?
Yeah.
What do you want to discuss first?
I would say let's start with the role of the trumpets. Why is it even there? That's where we are.
Yeah.
Okay. What could possibly come out of this that might be useful to anybody? Well, let's just start from where everyone is. Everyone suffers. Everyone has things that go wrong in life. Everyone has moments of sadness, moments of trial, moments of challenge, moments when they wonder if God is really there. I mean, after all, when your mom goes into the hospital and you pray that God will, bring her through this, and it doesn't happen, what then? I remember my father had a stroke, 1993, and that stroke took him out. I mean, he couldn't move, he couldn't think, he couldn't see, he couldn't talk. He was just in a vegetative state. And I remember about the 4th day, we asked for anointing service and had several pastors and elders come in. And I remember with strong crying and tears, saying to God, I'd like you to either bring him back the way he was or let him go. I says, either of those is acceptable. And God's answer was, no. 6.5 years of vegetative state. 6.5 years of my mom destroying her life, taking care of him. And after he died, she perked up for a year or so, and then it was downhill from there. And she was someone who could have lived to be 100, but she exhausted her life taking care of my dad. And so, you go through all those things and you say, where's God? This non-answer to what we needed. And when you think of persecution, that God says, I'll never forsake you, and then the Nazis come, or the communists come, or whoever, and persecution occurs, martyrdom, etc. Where is God? This is a core fundamental question. I believe that the trumpets are in Revelation to answer that question.
Which sounds like what the souls under the altar in the 5th seal were starting in terms of their cry. How long, how long? Mm-hmm. And now the trumpets come in to give an answer.
Well, the fascinating thing is when I started this study, I discovered that no Seventh-day Adventist scholar was noticing that.
Noticing which?
The connection with the 5th seal. But that outside the church, everybody saw it. And I say, why are they focusing on something so irrelevant? until I took a closer look. And, Revelation 6, verse 9, it says, when he broke the fifth seal, I saw underneath the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God, and because of the testimony which they had maintained. They cried out with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, will you refrain from judging and avenging our blood on who? Those who live on the earth. So here are the martyrs, the people who have suffered without an answer, okay? And they're crying out, how long is this going to go on? How long will it be until you do something about those who martyred us? And what do they call them? Those who live on the earth. All right? Keep that in mind. And turn to Revelation 8:13. Revelation 8:13, I looked and I heard an eagle flying in mid-heaven, saying with a loud voice, woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth because of the remaining blasts of the trumpet of the three angels who are about to sound. Who is the listeners to the woe? Those who live on the earth. Exact same phrase as the fifth seal. So the trumpets are directed at those who live on the earth. Now, if you don't know any significance for those who live on the earth, it just sounds like, well, these trumpets are on humanity. But no, it's a specific humanity. It's humanity that we're persecuting the people of God. God's people are saying, how long? And verse 13 of chapter 8 says, the trumpets are the answer. I would say, Dan, if you take the trumpets as covering history, which I do, then the trumpets are saying, within history, God is already dealing with those who have hurt you. Even though you can't see it, even though you don't know it, even though you're crying out, how long? He is. And that would be a message like the book of Job. The message of the seven trumpets is God is taking care of it. In his time, he will fix it. It may not be today, may not be tomorrow, may not be next month, but God is dealing with those who have hurt you, whether or not you know it.
And we're not just talking humans who have hurt us. We're talking great controversy, larger view like we spoke about last time, perspective on the host of enemies that camp around us to attack us.
Now, if you put the trumpets in the future, then the message is God will take care of it at the end.
Either way, God's going to take care of it.
Either way, he's going to take care of it. So, this piece works regardless of how you do it. But I think it's more beautiful if the trumpets, and I think one can demonstrate that, if the trumpets cover the whole Christian era like the seals do, if they're like a parallel idea, then it's telling us that from the beginning, God has been working to undo the injustices of this life.
Very good.
Yeah.
I was sitting here, I've known for a year and a half we were going to get to this day where Jon Paulien and I were going to disagree on the seven trumpets. I'm a futurist, he's a historicist.
Okay.
And I knew that I was going to make the speech about suffering. And all of a sudden, Jon Paulien's making the speech about suffering. I said, he's been converted. Somewhere but you are making the point then, is that what I believe God uniquely does at the very end, he's already been working on in some way for the last 2,000 years.
Sure.
So the introduction works for both sides of the view.
And even more than that.
Yeah, and I would point out that I think we touched on it when we were in the fifth seal, that there's two other answers to the question, how long? One of them is chapter 19, where Babylon has been judged and has been avenged, and the other's in chapter 20, where the redeemed, those who come out of the mark of the beast and everything, are raised up, and they are, the product of that cry in chapter 5. So there's two other places where you have an end-time answer to the question. So I would argue that if the trumpets are a place where it's not end time, it actually makes it more powerful because it expands God's intervention to the present, not just to the future. Now, come back, if you will, and then we have time for your argument. And I want to hear it all and bask in the amazing things I've never quite seen before. Okay, we're looking forward to that. All right, but chapter 8, 3 and 4 also connects with the fifth seal. And it says, another angel came and stood at the altar holding a golden censer, and much incense was given to him. What altar is that? Well, first of all, it's the altar, definite article, which means it's been there before. And the only other altar is fifth seal. Okay? But in case that's not convincing, it's an angel holding a golden censer, and incense is given to him. In the sanctuary, that doesn't happen at the altar of incense. He brings the incense to the altar of incense. The incense is given to him at the burnt offering altar. So this is the burnt offering altar, so it connects you with the fifth seal.
Very good.
Is given him the incense that he might add it to the prayers of the saints upon the golden altar which is before the throne. All right? So he's moving the incense from the outer court, altar burnt offering, to the inner sanctuary, the altar of incense. And so that movement is made in the daily service, as he talked about in the previous program. So this is a very recognizable part of it.
Very interesting.
And adds it to the prayers of the saints upon the golden altar before God. The smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints went up before God out of the angel's hands. So the incense is added to the prayers of the saints so that those prayers might be powerful before God. Where are the prayers of the saints? Fifth seal.
Same prayers? Is that what you believe? The prayers of the saints here are the same prayers as the ones in the fifth seal?
You got a better idea?
Different idea. I don't know if it's better or not. I'm glad to accept it.
Yeah.
You believe that the prayers, that's the connection.
Well, it doesn't mean that the prayers of verse 4 are limited to the cries of those particular people.
Okay.
It is maybe a bigger representation than that. But the connection of verses 3 and 4 to the fifth seal, I think.
So all prayers of people been pleading to God for relief from our tribulation would be included.
So the intercession of Christ covers all the prayers throughout history, including the prayers of the martyrs in the fifth seal. The trumpets are an answer to those prayers.
Yes.
Including the specific prayer we read in 6:9.
Right. And so, verse 5, the angel took the censer, filled it with the fire of the altar, threw it to the earth. Verse 6, 7 trumpets prepared to sound. So you see, the outcome of those prayers and the outcome of the intercession is the blowing of the 7 trumpets and all the activities that occur at that point. Now, if you're asking a New Testament reader, when did the intercession of Christ begin, what would the answer be? The day he joined the Father on the throne, Pentecost. Because on the day of Pentecost, that's when the outflow of the cross came to this earth and began to have its mighty effect. So I would understand verses 3 and 4 to be activity that begins in AD 31, begins on Pentecost when Jesus sits on the throne, and continues until the day that probation closes and intercession is no longer needed.
Wow.
And the center is hurled down.
Yeah. Okay, Dan,
Let's go.
give us a counterpoint here.
Too big. How am I going to do that?
Sometimes two great ideas produce a better idea.
And maybe we'll merge them somehow. I believe in both and.
Or maybe you'll just crawl away at the end of the program and say, I wish that was over.
Jon Paulien story? I've never told you this. This is a story with you in it. So I was, I'm a little younger, not much, but, I knew of you, but I never met you, ever. You don't remember this, I don't think. But I had been studying Revelation and had my view on the trumpets and talking to Marvin Moore and reading his book and all that. So we were at General Conference, I think, and we were at the same hotel, and I went to the swimming pool, and I looked across the pool, and you were there.
With 3 little kids, I suspect.
I don't remember the little kids reading something. Just
1990, yeah.
And I had not finished his book on the trumpets, which I should have. But I thought, the guy's here, The guy's right here in front of me. So I sucked up my courage and walked across the pool, and I introduced myself, and I said, I'm wrestling with the trumpets, and anyway, asked the question, historical or future? And he said, read my book. Which, rightly so. Why should I interrupt this guy at the pool and make him summarize this teaching when I hadn't finished reading the book? I said, touche. Go back and read the book.
What an annoying jerk. Who is this guy?
and that's why I know you don't remember it. But that's why I saw it. And I've been waiting for this time where we're going to have this out here and discuss it. Yeah. I'm not going to be able to cover all my background on this. I struggled in Revelation class with John Staples at PUC 45 years ago. I sat there as they began to read these passages, and then would go to tribes coming down to sack Rome, and Muslims 1,500 years ago. And I said, how did he know that? I'd look at there and look at the board, and I just couldn't usually see it. And then I had to teach a Revelation seminar in my little church in Oregon. The conference gave us one of these, seminars with all the colorful stuff. It was wonderful, really. And I had to teach it that night, and I just couldn't go back to the Roman tribes. I just couldn't. I said, there's got to be more to this than that. So in a nutshell, I believe that Revelation 7 is the cue, is the angels holding back the winds of strife. And that God has been holding back the winds of strife, and then finally at the end of the world, he has to say, okay, he has been mitigating the consequences of sin for thousands of years. He said, if you sin, you will surely die. The world has not fallen apart. So people think they can sin and get away with it, and God says, I'm going to have to make this more clear. And he tells the angels to begin to let go. And under the 7 seals, a fourth of the world is destroyed, metaphorically. And under the trumpets, a third of the world is destroyed. So I see a progression. I think it's a reason why those numbers are there. This is not mathematics, not number of houses or number of people. It's progression. And then under the plagues, there's no mercy in the wrath. It's just, here it is. All of it's there. And at the end of the world, people will see the truth and the 3 angels' messages and the loud cry about God. And they will also know the truth about evil. I accept the 2,000 years of history as the beginning, and I'm glad for your presentation on that it's all part of God revealing the consequences of evil. But I think the 7 seals and the 7 trumpets are the intensification of that at the end of the world. In a nutshell, there's more reasons than that, but that's the big
So you would go and say, these 4 angels are holding back the 4 winds, and when they release them, the earth, sea, and trees get hurt. And then in the first trumpet, verse 7, it says that third of the earth, third of the trees, sort of get burned up. So you would see that as chronological progression.
And the sealing after that.
Well, we'll get back to that next time. Yeah. Don't miss it.
So next time, we're right there. Now we know the issue. 7 trumpets. How does it relate in history? Is it future? Is it past? Is it both? This is God's Prophetic Surprises. We hope that you'll join us. Don't miss the next time. We'll go to the core of it.